Memory anchors the premise entirely for the director. The backrooms stand in for how recollection drifts from the empirical shape of actual events. Ordinariness itself supplies the dread here, a place so mundane that its extreme sameness curdles into something disturbing. Without correctness, familiarity leaves just enough gap for anyone's private fears to fill it. A flat, forgettable interior turns eerie precisely because nothing about it announces danger. Endless corridors of unfurnished, damp, moldy carpet stretch out room after room, echoing the least wanted corners of ordinary urban and commercial life, repeated without end. That single image seeds the project from end to end. Kane describes a life spent plugged into online culture well before the term chronically online existed. Back in 2019, an original Backrooms post paired a found photograph with a caption that laid down the premise: "Step outside the confines of the world and land somewhere else entirely." A search for the phrase online tends to surface the term "no clipping" alongside it. That phrase comes out of video game design, where an object phasing through another without proper collision detection simply passes through solid geometry, a floor with no resistance beneath it. The original wording held that no clipping out of reality in the wrong place drops a person into the backrooms, and that idea alone struck Kane as inherently compelling. Kane took a piece of internet folklore and pulled it into a specific storyline of his own. Two things combined to form his Backrooms series: the no-clipping concept and an early notion of liminal space, a term that the internet keeps stretching and mangling in his view. His own understanding treats liminal spaces as in-between places, open to each viewer's interpretation of exactly where the backrooms sit. Questions pile up without resolving. Another plane of reality or something folded into this one through some corner of quantum physics nobody fully grasps. The pandemic caught Kane halfway through his freshman year of high school, right when he picked up Blender, the free, open-source 3D software he now uses for everything. A creative purge anchored the goal for those weeks. A little time each day for about 3 weeks went into assembling that first Backrooms found footage video. Posted on January 7, 2022, it instantly outperformed anything he'd put on YouTube before. From there, the single video grew into a full YouTube series. A producer recalls having zero knowledge of the Backrooms phenomenon and doing what anyone her age might, asking her 17-year-old daughter and the daughter's boyfriend. Their reaction hit instant and profane, disbelief that she hadn't already heard of it. Another producer met the news with skepticism, doubting whether a viral short film phenomenon could survive the leap into a feature, a genuinely difficult transition to pull off. Feature filmmaking, by nature, demands fluency across so many disciplines at once that the craft tends to favor people with more years behind them, and it doesn't always sit comfortably with a young artist stepping into the role. Kane's grasp runs deep. No question about the Backrooms world stumps him, no corner of it left unconsidered. Curiosity drives him more than certainty. He simply wants to see what's happening inside it. One collaborator remembers her own younger years, when any question from a crew member sent her scrambling for an answer that sounded smart and confident. Kane's patience broke that pattern. Comfortable admitting what he didn't know, he put people at ease instead of testing them. Admiration shows plainly. One collaborator calls him a genius, adding that keeping pace with him feels like a welcome kind of catching up. The team fine-tunes physical performance in small increments. Hands need to read as though they're truly bearing weight even while a body stands upright, splitting the difference between an early attempt and the choice rehearsal produced. For one actor, working alongside his intentionality and specificity ranks among the shoot's genuine pleasures. A director-driven performer values exactly the confidence Kane projects, someone who clearly knows what he wants beat by beat. Youth doesn't undercut his specificity. His vision for the world comes through eloquent and driven despite his age. Ease spreads across the entire team, cast, crew, everyone attached to the project describes the same comfortable footing. Clark, the character at the center of the story, plays a failed architect now scraping by as a washed-up furniture store owner living out the early 90s in the middle of Silicon Valley. Disappointment piles onto him from every direction he can call external. He started life certain that things would work out. He studied architecture and simply didn't get far with it. Newly divorced when the story picks him up, he's still working through the wreckage of that relationship inside court-mandated therapy, wrestling with a habit of pinning blame on everyone but himself. A dismissive line about never becoming an architect draws a defiant response out of Clark, a flat insistence that he remains one regardless. Underneath the anger, hope survives. He keeps believing he can find his way through the mess he's made. Beneath his store, Clark uncovers a space that costs him dearly in attention, picking at his mind until it consumes him. Mary presses him on what he's found. His therapist wants specifics. Clark's answer stays deliberately vague, a place, nothing more specific offered. Her interest sharpens the more he talks, curious whether it all lives only inside his head. He describes it as a maze that never resolves, admits a fear of getting lost in it, and dodges the obvious question of why no one else has ever stumbled onto it. When he vanishes, Mary goes looking for him and finds the exact place he'd been describing all along, a world that resembles ours on its surface and betrays it entirely underneath. Anticipation built for one designer around the first chance to actually sit inside the built maze instead of merely imagining it. Genuine excitement centers on getting the backrooms physically constructed. No digital stand-in offered the same charge. That so much of it existed physically, not as simulation, is what carried enormous value on its own. For more than one crew member, the sets themselves top the list of what everyone most wants to talk about. People linger and marvel at them even after wrapping for the day. Years of working solo inside Blender, running a self-contained pipeline, didn't fully prepare one artist for stepping into a much larger collaborative team, one he describes landing in with unusually talented, friendly people. He partnered with the art department next. The art team populates nothing in the space without a reason behind it. Within the backrooms, that specificity traces directly back to Kane's instincts, honed and exact. Early conversations wrestled with the internal logic of the world, whether sets could handle reuse, whether the space itself morphs or shifts under the character's passage through it. Ideas ranged from ceilings rigged on motors to walls that shift mid-scene, until a conversation with Kane settled the matter. The backrooms hold their shape underfoot, unchanged with each step. That clarity let one artist build a complete model of the space in Blender first, tracing a clear path through every script beat before handing finished files off to the build team, a reversal of the usual order. A director normally receives a finished file instead of handing over the map that generates it. Alan Dirksen, the art director, single-handedly turned those Blender files into workable blueprints the carpenters could actually build from. 3D scans of the finished sets, checked side by side against the original digital files, come back essentially one for one. A master plan slowly unfurled its own scale as production went on, revealing that the project needed far more square footage than anyone first estimated, 4 full stages eventually, with rooms meant to sit next to each other, sometimes separated by the width of an entire soundstage. One actor genuinely lost his way on set, wandering off toward a bathroom on vague directions, and ending up completely alone inside the built maze, a stretch of solitude spent simply feeling a wall, feeling the carpet, investigating a strange alcove that opened up unexpectedly. An actual room changes performance. No simulation replicates that effect, several crew members agree. Scale itself fuels part of the fun inside the finished backrooms, the sheer volume of carpet and wallpaper covering everything. Carpet alone ran past 22,000 square feet once stairs and walls joined the tally, and wallpaper climbed into the 30,000 square foot range. The first sheet of that wallpaper reportedly took 3 hours just to hang straight, a vinyl-based material the crew fought through until, by the shoot's end, an entire apartment set could go up in about 30 seconds. Careful curation shaped the furniture pile from early on. The team wanted it to read as deliberately beautiful, never as accidental clutter. Deeper into the maze sit fully invented streets and swimming pools, plus a pool room built from carpet standing in for water and a sideways room where the crew rotates an entire set onto its side, lighting and carpet both mounted to the wall. One actor found Kane's created world genuinely affecting to move through, eerie, uncomfortable, disturbing in a way that stayed with her. All roads trace back to Kane. Anomalies scattered through the world build towards something close to an ominous maze. Contrast set the visual rule for scenes set outside the backrooms, deliberately pushed against the beige and yellow palette that dominates the backrooms themselves. Vintage furniture filled out an entire built store, period accurate down to the technology, palette, and texture choices needed for a story set in 1990. Worry crept in for one designer that a particular visual choice cluttered the room without actually enhancing it, a point she admits staying undecided on. The crew regardless grew fond of Captain Clark's furniture store, largely because it came with pre-existing fluorescent fixtures already installed. The crew wired those fixtures into a dimmer board, letting them flicker deliberately during the climax between Mary and Pirate Clark, a small technical trick that ended up embodying the project's spirit entirely. Adapting the original YouTube series into a feature-length format posed its own challenge, given how impressive the source material already stood on its own terms. Logic weighed on the shoot the same way Image did. A character exiting a room too cleanly risks breaking the internal rules the crew had spent months establishing. Sustained continuity mattered most. It topped one filmmaker's list of priorities throughout the shoot. Early conversations with Kane centered on subjective perspective, experiencing each space exactly the way the characters experience it, never letting the camera reveal more than a character has actually seen. A stop sign planted deep in one corridor functions in the story as a literal warning sign, the camera pushing in on it the instant a low battery icon pops into view on screen, a small visual gut punch timed to land with the character's own dawning panic. Complex staging defines the cinematography. Straight lines matter less here than diagonals cutting through frame. One cinematographer describes leaning camera positions left of center, never dead on, adjusting depending on whether the shot runs straight down a corridor or curls around a corner, where the inside line offers the natural path to follow. Jeremy's photography draws praise from more than one collaborator, ranking among the most striking work on the shoot. The team settled on a Sony Venice 2 for the camera, picked largely for its dual-base ISO, the ability to shoot at 3200 or 800 depending on the light, paired with a compact body that could squeeze into the back room's tight corridors. Wide lenses running from 12 to 18 millimeters, combined with heavy use of Steadicam, let the camera stay close to the actors and explore the space the way they themselves discover it. A distinct yellow defines the original series, matching it precisely across every wallpaper roll, and lighting setup absorbed considerable effort from the production design team. Fluorescent light bulbs draw an entire sequence devoted to them in the shorts, a detail that fascinated at least one department head enough to chase the same effect on set. Troffers and fluorescent fixtures sit baked deep into the backroom's visual identity, making lighting the sets a genuine challenge on its own. Every fixture was thought through in advance, a fine dance between grid, lights, and drop ceiling that had to go in a strict order. Homemade cardboard troffers fitted with asteroid tubing eventually solved the scaling problem across every set, letting the crew dial fluorescent levels up or down while keeping the exact effect intact. An exterior alley run, spanning roughly 200 feet, needed to read like it belonged inside a backroom, achieved through 5 balloon lights strung along its length, a surreal sight by the gaffer's account, watching an ordinary alley lit up in that artificial glow. Shooting approach shifted noticeably. The story had moved into the world outside the backrooms, and everything about the method changed with it. The camera pulled back a little, observing the actors existing inside their spaces without pressing close, aided by a slightly longer focal length that visually separated these shots from the backrooms proper. Natural light through windows marked the biggest change of all, sunlight allowed to feel genuinely sourced from outside, a deliberate contrast against the liminal space's front lighting, wide angles, and intentional white balance errors. Counterintuitive though it sounds, that approach ran against almost every conventional idea of cinematic style. Never before had one crew member worked on a project where the entire visual background for half the film sat locked in advance. References pulled from unexpected places, Eric Romer's films among them, alongside Office Space for its sterile muted color world defining 1990s corporate blandness. For the costume designer, nostalgia for the decade ran deep enough to push the wardrobe further, toward an 80s inflected version of the same world. Research always starts with stock photography of ordinary people on actual streets in whatever setting the crew prepares to shoot, a baseline for building each character's appearance outward from there. Clark's wardrobe needed to render him almost as a man disappearing into himself, both in his regular life and inside the backrooms, a quietness to the overall styling, muted, sun-bleached, washed-out tones throughout. Mary's silhouettes, by contrast, read as more interesting and inquisitive, her hero blouse landing in a pastel, muted register that visually tied her to Clark without matching him outright. Phil needed softness, an early draft of his costume had read too stiff. A niche Conway's Game of Life t-shirt, an idea only Kane would think to suggest, ended up giving Phil's character a welcome dose of nerdiness. Ordinary liminal quality carries a strange promise of safety with it, right up until that promise breaks. Practical effects planning moves toward tearing something open deliberately, holes placed carefully so a surface rips convincingly on camera, adjustable up to a fully torn version if the shot calls for it. Depth into the maze correlates directly with terror once a monster enters the equation. For one collaborator, working on the backrooms delivers an unambiguous blast, admittedly one she didn't fully anticipate going in. Everything moved fast once production began. Teeth worked their way deliberately into a practical effect, with a bloodier version held in reserve for later use. On the surface, Pirate Clark fills the story's obvious antagonist role, though one actor considers him, on a personal level, deeply misunderstood, a darker mirror version of Clark himself, bottled fears and failures and nightmares compressed into a single figure. Pirate Clark moves like a monster who understands his own body completely, aware of his powers, his limits, every capability mapped out in advance. Deliberateness defines his movement. Nothing about him twitches without purpose. The slightest tilt of Robert's head inside the costume chills the frame outright. Assumptions about a performer that size can undersell the physical effort a monster role actually demands, something the actor pushed back against directly. A previous role had demanded roughly 5 hours in a makeup chair applying prosthetic pieces, so getting into the Pirate Clark costume in around 10 minutes felt like an enormous relief by comparison. Prosthetics break down into handpieces, a helmet, and a heavy face piece, limiting visibility considerably despite looking striking on camera. Robert's unusually narrow waist forced the costume department to compensate with a wild shoulder pad piece, landing on a strange, unexpected silhouette that one designer ended up loving. Still lives inside the Backrooms rank among favorite elements for more than one crew member. Objects that resemble and move like people, yet never fully cross into personhood. Edibility supplies their strangest quality, a detail delivered almost like a punchline. Calling them people stretches the word. They read instead like extensions of the space itself, replicas slightly distorted, less organic than anything human, part environment and part human all at once. This film, and most of the director's work generally, engages directly with memory. Inspiration and method both trace back to how the human mind actually processes memory, storing it, archiving it, retrieving it through a chemical process that carries no guarantee of clarity or sanctity. Memory carries a physical weight, plainly stated, twice for emphasis. Through dream logic, the clearest way in opens that particular feeling when something in a dream edges close enough to reality to convince you, even while some part of you knows it doesn't belong there. The illusion holds regardless. Fear intensifies once things go wrong precisely because these spaces don't usually train a person to expect danger. An empty swimming pool after a party, stared at long enough into the night, starts throwing up shapes among the trees at the back, ordinariness curdling slowly into dread the longer the eye lingers. Supposed ordinariness keeps driving the horror deeper the longer it sits unresolved, and that ordinariness marks the actual starting point for why the Backrooms unsettle people at all. Architectural roots keep pushing upward the deeper one goes, hinting at something larger without ever confirming it. Mythology this diffuse resists a single source. It feels instead like it surrounds everything at once. By one collaborator's account, anyone chasing the mythology simply keeps peeking further in, inferring more from how the place keeps forming and what shows up inside it. A massive web whose shape only clarifies once enough of it actually comes into view.